and Development Economics. Dr. Kartika Sanjarini, expert in molecular biology. Abu Bakar Ebihara, PhD, expert in international relations. By 2018, the university has vast range of programs to choose from 15 faculties, 27 postgraduate programs, and 73 undergraduate studies. To support the objectives of education, research, and community service, and to optimize the nature laboratory potentials around Jember, the university has developed and established branch campuses in 2 nearby towns, Bondowoso and Lumajang, which enables a well-built connection for the experts to innovate through their studies and researches, which then provide benefit to the surrounding society. The learning atmosphere is constructed not only to produce mere scientists, but also the ones with social awareness and responses to the problems in both local and global society. Dealing with the challenge, the university educates the students through learning, researches, and community service. To support an easy access to academic atmosphere, the students are provided with Integrated Information System, or SISTER, and e-learning, making them possible to communicate with the professors and to obtain information in seconds through their smartphones. Universitas Jember also consistently collaborates with international experts to share their reputable knowledge through a general stadium for students to open their insights and enhance their knowledge. Universitas Jember also supports students and teaching staffs to broaden both knowledge and experiences through its mobility and exchange programs. Several world-class and reputable universities in the world have been involved and participated in the program, such as Students' Mobility. Such valuable academic atmosphere has driven international students to study in Universitas Jember, including those from the United States of America, Germany, Iran, South Korea, Laos, Madagascar, Timor-Leste, Cambodia, and Thailand. The university is committed to provide fundings for talented and outstanding international students by providing scholarships and support them with extensive Indonesian language training, assisting them to adapt and engage actively to their surroundings. The recruitment of international scientists, experts, and students has been arranged selectively to promote wider knowledge and insights for the surrounding community to make greater future possible. To foster the students' competence to enhance their knowledge, our highly competent professors and lecturers are committed to the development of teaching and learning process. The professors and experts in Universitas Jember have been supporting students to achieve their competence. They are committed to dedicate their time to guide and supervise students' work and to develop students' knowledge. Research groups and Center of Excellence are available to create research atmosphere in each faculty and across multidisciplines. Amongst many are CURIS, CDUST, CHRM2, CGANT, CIRISH, SDG Center, and Tropical NRC. Our research centers has remarkably increased their productivity since the last 5 years. Our creative and innovative researches contribute greatly to the development of science and society. In 2013, Universitas Jember was awarded MDG's Trophy for its contribution to coffee farmers in Sidomulyo Village, Jember, Indonesia. The university also established the SDG Center to support sustainable development goals. Universitas Jember does not only house one centralized library, rather, each faculty is facilitated with a library completed with abundant literatures on its respected field. The students are also facilitated with free access to digital journals hosted by reputable publishers such as Springer and Nature. Universitas Jember Community Service is a compulsory program for students as a training to respond to community's problem. Students are assigned to work in groups with their multidisciplinary backgrounds to live within the period of 40 days among the society. The community service is regularly programmed twice a year in January and July. The community service enables students to get involved to find solutions to society's problems. Sri Dharma has greatly supported the development of knowledge, teaching, and learning process through the formal education. On the other hand, Universitas Jember also greatly concerns on students' talents and interests. Student bodies and clubs are available as the best places for students to learn science, arts, interpersonal skill, organization, and to socialize with other fellow students. An excellent and innovative generation to develop knowledge and science for the society within religious perspectives and beliefs. This is the vision of Universitas Jember to create a better future for mankind. Tradition of excellence. Universitas Jember is a center for higher education founded in 1964. The motto, Karya Rinaras Ambuka Budi, Gapuro Mangesti Aruming Bawono, is a commitment of the university's founding fathers to produce creative and innovative generation in developing knowledge and to serve the society based on the faith and religion. The university's motto becomes the academic base for the leaders of the university from time to time to adapt and draw near the development of science and technology to reach the position as the center of academic in Indonesia, Asia, and the world. Universitas Jember is located in East Java Province, Indonesia. Universitas Jember plays its central role to develop science and technology in various sectors such as plantation, agriculture, maritime, health, tourism, industry, arts, and culture. The agriculture and plantation sectors have made Jember famous for its coffee, sugarcane, tea, tobacco, cocoa, and edamame soybean. Jember is also culturally unique with diverse mix of Javanese, Madurese, Osing, Chinese, and Arab culture. 4 national parks which become nature laboratories to develop science. Rich and abundant natural resources provide history and phenomena for potential researches. The potential research and the development of knowledge generate scientists in their own field. Professor Bambang Sugiarto, expert in biotechnology and genetics engineering. Professor Bambang Kuswandi, expert in analytic chemistry, chemosensor, and biosensor. Professor Ahmad Subagio, expert in biotechnology, food sciences, and nutrition. Professor Rudy Wibowo, expert in agricultural economics. Professor Nawianto, expert in economic and environmental history. Professor Slamin, expert in graph theory. Professor Davik, expert in combinatorics, graph theory, and combinatorial education. Professor M. Arif Amrullah, expert in criminal policy and economic criminal law. Aditya Wardono, PhD, expert in Asian monetary, financial, and development economics. Dr. Kartika Sanjarini, expert in molecular biology. Abu Bakar Ebihara, PhD, expert in international relations. By 2018, the university has vast range of programs to choose from 15 faculties, 27 postgraduate programs, and 73 undergraduate studies. To support the objectives of education, research, and community service, and to optimize the nature laboratory potentials around Jember, the university has developed and established branch campuses in 2 nearby towns, Bondowoso and Lumajang, which enables a well-built connection for the experts to innovate through their studies and researches, which then provide benefit to the surrounding society. The learning atmosphere is constructed not only to produce mere scientists, but also the ones with social awareness and responses to the problems in both local and global society. Dealing with the challenge, the university educates the students through learning, researches, and community service. To support an easy access to academic atmosphere, the students are provided with integrated information system or SISTER and e-learning, making them possible to communicate with the professors and to obtain information in seconds through their smartphones. Universitas Jember also consistently collaborates with international experts to share their reputable knowledge through a general stadium for students to open their insights and enhance their knowledge. Universitas Jember also supports students and teaching staffs to broaden both knowledge and experiences through its mobility and exchange programs. Several world-class and reputable universities in the world have been involved and participated in the program, such as Students' Mobility. Such valuable academic atmosphere has driven international students to study in Universitas Jember, including those from the United States of America, Germany, Iran, South Korea, Laos, Madagascar, Timor-Leste, Cambodia, and Thailand. The university is committed to provide fundings for talented and outstanding international students by providing scholarships and support them with extensive Indonesian language training, assisting them to adapt and engage actively to their surroundings. The recruitment of international scientists, experts, and students has been arranged selectively to promote wider knowledge and insights for the surrounding community to make greater future possible. To foster the students' competence to enhance their knowledge, our highly competent professors and lecturers are committed to the development of teaching and learning process. The professors and experts in Universitas Jember have been supporting students to achieve their competence. They are committed to dedicate their time to guide and supervise students' work and to develop students' knowledge. Research groups and Center of Excellence are available to create research atmosphere in each faculty and across multidisciplines. Amongst many are CURIS, CDUST, CHRM2, SIGANT, CIRISH, SDG Center, and Tropical NRC. Our research centers has remarkably increased their productivity since the last 5 years. Our creative and innovative researches contribute greatly to the development of science and society. In 2013, Universitas Jember was awarded MDG's Trophy for its contribution to coffee farmers in Sidomulyo Village, Jember, Indonesia. The university also established the SDG Center to support sustainable development goals. Universitas Jember does not only house one centralized library, rather, each faculty is facilitated with a library completed with abundant literatures on its respected field. The students are also facilitated with free access to digital journals hosted by reputable publishers such as Springer and Nature. Universitas Jember Community Service is a compulsory program for students as a training to respond to community's problem. Students are assigned to work in groups with their multidisciplinary backgrounds to live within the period of 40 days among the society. The community service is regularly programmed twice a year in January and July. The community service enables students to get involved to find solutions to society's problems. Tridharma has greatly supported the development of knowledge, teaching, and learning process through the formal education. On the other hand, Universitas Jember also greatly concerns on students' talents and interests. Student bodies and clubs are available as the best places for students to learn science, arts, interpersonal skill, organization, and to socialize with other fellow students. An excellent and innovative generation to develop knowledge and science for the society within religious perspectives and beliefs. This is the vision of Universitas Jember to create a better future for mankind. Tradition of excellence. Universitas Jember is a center for higher education founded in 1964. The motto, Karya Rinaras Ambuka Budi, Gapuro Mangesti Aruming Bawono, is a commitment of the university's founding fathers to produce creative and innovative generation.
Mohon perhatian, acara akan segera dimulai. Attention please, the event is about to start. Selamat datang di acara kuliah umum dengan tema Pandemi, Memajukan atau Memperburuk Masa Depan Demokrasi. Program studi Pascasarjana Ilmu Administrasi, Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember, Kamis 24 September 2020. Kami informasikan bahwa acara ini dapat diakses di link Zoom dan juga channel YouTube PS MIA FISIP UNEJ. Welcome to the open lecture on the theme of Pandemic, Accelerating or Exacerbating the Future of Democracy, Postgraduate Program of Administration Science, Faculty of Social and Political Science, University of Jember. We would like to inform that this event can be accessed by Zoom and PS MIA FISIP UNEJ YouTube channel. Yang terhormat, Penjabat Dekan Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember. Yang kami hormati, Ketua Program Studi Pascasarjana Ilmu Administrasi, Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember. Yang kami hormati, narasumber, moderator, dan peserta yang berbahagia. The Honorable Dean of the Faculty of Social and Political Science, University of Jember. The Honorable Head of the Postgraduate Program, Faculty of Social and Political Science, University of Jember. The speaker, moderator, and participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera. Segala puja dan puji marilah kita panjatkan kepada Tuhan Yang Maha Esa karena limpahan rahmat, taufik, serta hidayahnya pada pagi hari ini, Kamis 24 September 2020, program studi Ilmu Administrasi, Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember dapat melaksanakan kegiatan. Hadirin yang kami hormati, perkenankan kami menyampaikan susunan acara pada pagi hari ini. 1. Pembukaan. 2. Menyanyikan lagu Indonesia Raya dan Mars Universitas Jember. 3. Sambutan penjabat dekan Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember. 4. Pembacaan doa. 5. Pembacaan tata tertib. 6. Acara inti. 7. Tanya jawab. 8. Dokumentasi. 9. Penutup. Distinguished guests, please allow us to present the schedule for this morning. First, opening. Second, Indonesian anthem and followed by University of Jember anthem. Third, speech of the Dean of the Faculty of Social and Political Science, University of Jember. Fourth, short prayer. Fifth, rules of the open lecture. Sixth, main events. 7. Question and answer session. 8. Documentation. And the last is closing. Acara yang pertama menyanyikan lagu Indonesia Raya dan Mars Universitas Jember. Kepada seluruh hadirin dimohon untuk mempersiapkan diri. The first agenda, Indonesian anthem and followed by University of Jember anthem. To all attendees, please prepare yourself.
Kami keliling.
Berikutnya adalah sambutan penjabat Dekan Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember, Profesor Dr. Hadi Prayitno MKes. Next is the speech of the Dean of the Faculty of Social and Political Science, University of Jember, to Professor Dr. Hadi Prayitno MKes. Time is yours.
Thank you very much. The Honorable, the Vice Deans, and the lecturers of Faculty of Social and Political Science, University of Jember. The Honorable, all the guests who are willing to attend this webinar. The Honorable Dr. Thomas says as the speakers, welcome back to Jember University. The brilliant attendees who have joined this webinar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everybody, and good evening for Dr. Thomas Say. Welcome. First of all, let me say how pleased I am to see so many of you gathered here for this open lecture, annually held by the Master Program of Administrative Science, University of Jember. Before we get started, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who generously helped us make this event come together to become a success, especially the head of Master Program of Administrative Science, University of Jember, Mr. Rahmat Hidayat. Congratulations on your well-deserved success. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the entire human life. The adoption of new lifestyle cannot be avoided and must be carried out together. Implementing the new normal is a real step in dealing with COVID-19, including Indonesia. However, there are several obstacles to its implementation. Responding to implementing the new normal policy requires synergy and a harmonious understanding between the central and local government. Ladies and gentlemen, the central government has consequences for being a strong backing for the local government's needs in implementing the new normal, such as facilities, funding, and even binding regulations. Meanwhile, as the regard, the local government must be firm and congregate to mobilize our resources to help and encourage the understanding of the people in the region. The COVID-19 pandemic has also brought difficulties for the community. Change in social patterns have negatively impacted decreasing income, meeting daily needs, and obstacle to access public services. Changes in social patterns during this pandemic have prompted the implementation of available service reform, especially technology. This reformation encouraged community and administrators to become technology literate. However, this new system makes many people cannot access public services due to limited knowledge, facilities, and the economy. The community demands the government presence, especially local governments, as the close to them to be able to meet the needs of their people and provide a sense of security to the community. Although there are still many problems that occur in applying the new normal both on the social order of society and government. We have seen this as opportunities for improving the quality of the state in many aspects, especially the relationship between the central and regional governments. The image is not the repression of the central government toward the local government or resistance of the local government against the central governments, but harmonious relation between government levels that have high responsiveness to the community. From this webinar, I hope that the participant will get lesson about the public policy of local governments in Indonesia in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and studied about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic for future democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, I hope this will be useful for all of us. And without further ado, by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I declare this webinar entitled Pandemic, Accelerating or Exacerbating the Future of Democracy is open. Thank you very much and have a good day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Pembacaan doa yang akan dipimpin oleh Bapak Hari Wibowo. Short prayer will be led by Mr. Hari Wibowo. To Mr. Hari Wibowo, time is yours.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sebelum acara ini dimulai, marilah kita bersama-sama menundukkan kepala, bermunajat kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Semoga apa yang sudah dan akan kita laksanakan mendapat rahmat, hidayah dan keridhaannya. Dan bagi saudara-saudara kami yang beragama selain Islam, silahkan menyesuaikan menurut keyakinan masing-masing. A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Hamdan yuwafi hamdan ya'mahu yukafi majidah. Ya Rabbana lakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalal karimi wa adimi sultanik. Allahumma shalli wa sallim ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa baraka wa sallam. Ya Allah, ya Tuhan kami, kusanjung hanyalah untuk-Mu. Engkaulah Tuhan yang Maha Pengasih lagi Maha Penyayang. Perkenankanlah kami semua yang hadir di ruang virtual ini dengan segala keikhlasan dan kerendahan hati menundukkan kepala untuk memanjatkan doa kehadirat-Mu dalam rangka kuliah umum di program Pascasarjana Magister Ilmu Administrasi FISIP Universitas Jember. Ya Allah, ya Rahman, tujuan kami menyelenggarakan kegiatan ini adalah untuk meningkatkan wawasan kepada para mahasiswa. Namun kami sadar ya Allah bahwa hal itu semua tidak akan terwujud kecuali atas berkenan, kehendak dan kuasa-Mu. Oleh karena itu, dalam kesempatan yang istimewa ini kami memohon kepadamu, ya Allah, demi sifat pengampunan-Mu, ampunilah dosa kami, dosa kedua orang tua kami, dosa guru-guru kami, dosa para pemimpin kami, serta dosa para pendahulu kami. Ya Maliku ya Kudus, kami agungkan nama-Mu, karena hanya Engkaulah Tuhan kami. Hanya kepadamu kami bersujud, hanya kepadamu kami bersyukur, dan hanya kepadamu kami memanjatkan doa. Ya Rabbana, hari ini kami berkumpul di majelis ilmiah untuk berdiskusi, mengurai karunia ilmu yang telah Engkau limpahkan kepada kami sebagai bentuk sumbangsih terbaik bagi kami bangsa Indonesia ini. Ya Allah, lancarkanlah acara kami, berkahilah, penuhilah pertemuan ini dengan kebaikan dari awal hingga akhir nanti. Ya Allah, bukalah pikiran kami, lenturkanlah lidah kami, dan berikanlah kepada kami ide-ide cemerlang untuk membangun kekuatan keilmuan bangsa ini. Ya Allah, yang maha mengetahui yang gaib, bimbinglah kami dengan hidayah-Mu, berkahilah kami selalu dengan takdir-Mu, dan jadikanlah hati kami selalu ridho dengan pemberian-Mu. Rabbis rohli sodri wa yassirli amri, wahlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qauli. Ya Tuhanku, lapangkanlah dada kami, dan lancarkanlah lidah kami, serta mudahkanlah segala urusan kami di dunia dan di akhirat nanti. Ya Allah, tunjukkanlah kepada kami bahwa yang benar adalah benar dan berikan kepada kami kekuatan dan kemampuan untuk menjalankannya, serta tunjukkan bahwa yang salah adalah salah, dan berikan kami kekuatan dan kemampuan untuk meninggalkannya. Rabbana dhalamna anfusana wa illam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna minal khasirin. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina azabannar. Wadkhilnal jannata ma'al abror ya aziz ya ghaffar ya rabbal alamin. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa baraka wa sallam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wassalamun alal mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Summa wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Sebelum acara kuliah umum dimulai, perkenankan saya membacakan beberapa tata tertib demi kelancaran dan kehikmatan acara. 1. Mohon memastikan bahwa koneksi internet dalam keadaan stabil. 2. Peserta dimohon untuk tidak mengaktifkan mikrofon selama kegiatan berlangsung kecuali pada saat sesi tanya-jawab. 3. Seluruh peserta diharapkan menyalakan kamera video. 4. Peserta dimohon untuk menggunakan nama asli atau instansi, bukan nama perangkat. 5. Link presensi akan dibagikan di akhir acara. 6. Seluruh peserta diharapkan mengikuti sesi kegiatan hingga selesai dengan tertib. Before the open lecture program begins, let me read some of the rules so that this event will run well. First, please ensure that your internet connection is stable. Second, participants are requested to turn off the microphone except for the question and answer session. Third, participants are requested to turn on the camera. Fourth, participants are requested to use real name or institution, not the device. Fifth, the list of attendance will be deployed during the end of the session. Please make sure to record your attendance. 6. Participants are expected to follow this event till the end orderly. Memasuki acara inti, hadirin dimohon mempersiapkan diri. Ladies and gentlemen, entering the main event, please prepare yourself. Acara inti akan dipandu oleh moderator Bapak Rahmat Hidayat PhD. The main event will be hosted by our moderator, Mr. Rahmat Hidayat PhD. To Mr. Rahmat Hidayat, time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera untuk semuanya. Saya akan bicara dalam bahasa Indonesia dulu. Senang sekali bertemu dengan Anda semua hari ini dalam acara Open Lecture ketiga oleh Pascasarjana Magister Ilmu Administrasi. Dan tim mengucapkan terima kasih sebesar-besarnya atas support dari Dekanat FISIP Universitas Jember atas terselenggaranya acara ini. Mohon maaf. Dan acara hari ini kita beruntung sekali karena ada pembicara dari University of Wyoming, Dr. Thomas Seitz. Oke. Saya akan berbicara dalam bahasa Inggris setelah ini, jadi nanti teman-teman tolong bisa mengikuti karena nanti Pak Tom juga akan ngomong secara pelan-pelan. But before going to open, I'm just going to say hi to Professor Seitz. Hello, Pak Tom. How are you today?
Hello, Dr. Rahmat. Very well. How are you?
Good, not too bad. We're sorry here in Indonesia because of the time difference. You have to postpone your dinner.
It's no problem. I won't miss my dinner.
Okay, then. So we're really lucky today because this is actually the second time that Professor Seitz is coming to town. Technically, he should be able to come again in the near future after the pandemic is gone. So I'm going to short read bio on Professor Seitz. Professor Seitz is currently the director of the International Studies of University of Wyoming, and he is a political scientist, focuses on examining nation building as a part of foreign policy and democratization project. He has done extensive research on democratizations in Indonesia. And relating to the topic that we have today, which is the pandemic accelerating or exacerbating the future of democracy, it is really interesting development these days, as we can see the pandemic is become one of the game changer that actually became one of the means of stress test to democracy. As we can see, several government with who practicing authoritarian regime as doing so very well, like you can say, or even communism, just like you can see in Vietnam, while other countries which embracing democracy, it's kind of like lag behind in for developing some really good response to the pandemic. This is lead us into a question whether this pandemic is actually going to destroy democracy in the future, or is going to make democracy stronger. One of the questions that is important. I hope by this open lecture, we can get a glimpse of view of how this the future democracy with this contemporary challenge of pandemic. So there's nothing else, I think, in my mind when we have this topic other than Professor Sates. So Professor Sates, the time is yours. So please, you can use as many time as you want the time. But for the lecture, we're hoping like 30 to 40 minutes, and then we're going to continue with Q&A. So I'm going to invite everyone as well to make a question. So when you have a question, you can put it in the chat box. And then on the later part of the discussion, I will read or invite some of the questions to make a direct question to Professor Seeds. Okay, Professor Seeds, the time is yours.
Thank you very much. And good morning. Selamat pagi. It's good to see my friends in Jember again, even though I can't be there right now. But as Dr. Rahmat said, I look forward to being there soon. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. Pardon me if I cough a bit. I promise it's not COVID. I'm just getting old. But I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about the impact of the pandemic on democracies, and not just the American democracy, although the behavior of the US, as I'll talk about, has quite an impact on democracies and democratic movements around the world. President Trump's response to the pandemic has not been very inspiring, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So I'd like to proceed. So we talk about the pandemic is presenting threats and opportunities. Threats for whom? Opportunities for whom? It seems certain that change is the order of the day. And as the dean said, we are living with a new normal. We're adjusting to the new normal, even when we don't yet know just quite what that new normal will be. But there are threats and opportunities. We like to think that challenges like the pandemic cause people to work together. Crises often foster cooperation. The last time that really happened in this country, in the United States, was in the 1930s. America met the economic collapse and the Great Depression with the New Deal that was implemented by President Franklin Roosevelt. It was the closest the United States has ever come to socialism. It was an extreme program of government spending and government effort to respond to the Great Depression, to meet the crisis. It seemed like nothing was too much to ask. And it did foster a great deal of cooperation. People pulled together, they worked, and they got the country through the crisis. Today, we're facing a worldwide pandemic. The response seems fragmented and politically divisive, both in the USA and around the world. China and the United States have been particularly unhelpful in meeting the crisis. They should have been sources of leadership. A tremendous opportunity for cooperation was wasted, and both governments did their best to politicize the disease. In the United States, the disease was politicized primarily internally, but also outside in foreign policy. In China, where the government controls information internally, the politicization took place mainly in China's foreign policy. And this is why we talk about how it can be an opportunity for authoritarians. Many political scientists and comparative politics specialists ask whether there is an authoritarian advantage in development. They look at success stories like China, like Singapore, and they ask whether it would be more effective for a leader with a vision to lead the country forward without having to worry about things like a legislature or elections, to simply focus on getting the job done. And this is interesting because this is a model that competes with liberal democracy, both in the world and within many countries. Xi Jinping unabashedly paints China as a great success story in how they controlled COVID-19. This is not an entirely true narrative. There have been successes, and President Xi was certainly more devoted to the process than President Trump in the United States. He attributes the success to the strong central role of the Communist Party. Well, the Communist Party plays a strong central role in China, certainly. But again, I don't know if the story that the narrative that they met COVID-19 successfully is really true. But it leaves many to wonder, do authoritarian countries have an advantage in beating crises like this? The data suggests not necessarily so. Authoritarian societies have not fared the best, even though their results are somewhat complicated by questions over their numbers that they report. Can we really trust them? Russia is a real problem this way. We can hardly believe the numbers that they cite. China is a problem as well, and various other authoritarians where the government controls information flows in and out of the country. It's difficult to know, but even with the data that they provide, it doesn't seem that authoritarianism has helped a country survive. Culture and political culture seems to have played quite a role. And if we look at the chart, we can see that East Asian societies made early progress in the virus compared with most Western societies. So it's arguably not necessarily authoritarianism, but possibly a more collectivist-based society, one that's based less on individualism, like the United States, and more on community. So these countries have done fairly well. They've had flare-ups since then, but they're all doing better than most European countries, and certainly the United States. So there is the idea that political culture plays a role in how countries pull together to meet a crisis. But one country had exceptionally bad performance, and that, as you can see, is the United States. Not only did the people of the United States, especially on the right wing of the political spectrum, not take the virus seriously, the president actually circulated a great deal of disinformation for political purposes. because he politicized the disease with his own reelection in mind. So he's politicized the situation for the purpose of promoting his own reelection. The election will be in early November, so not far away. And this cartoon carries the sentiment of a lot of people, a lot of Trump supporters, unfortunately. Political affiliation this year coincides with the wearing of masks, and even with belief in the pandemic. The president and news outlets that support him had first promoted the idea that there was no pandemic, that it was a hoax that was perpetrated by its political opponents, then that the disease was no more serious than the flu, that there would be no more than 15 cases, and later that there would be no more than 500 deaths, and later that there would be no more than 100,000 deaths, and yesterday we just exceeded 200,000 deaths. So the president has continually put out disinformation about the disease. He has advised people to take a drug, possibly toxic drug that is not effective against the disease. At one bizarre time, he told people to inject household disinfectants as a way of preventing the disease. He undermines the position of his scientific advisors, and now he has put political appointees into the science and health agencies to control the information that comes out so that nothing comes out that's unfavorable to the president. In my long lifetime, I have never seen the politicization of health that I'm seeing now. So this is truly exceptional, the way he has managed to politicize this pandemic. Mask wearing has even been equated with a communist agenda, or as the president puts it, an extreme far left-wing agenda. So as you can see, here's a picture of Karl Marx wearing a mask with Joe Biden's name on it, the Democratic opponent in the upcoming election. Many people in the US were pressured not to wear masks by Trump supporters who argued that to wear a mask was a sign of disrespect to the president because the president had said it wasn't necessary. And some of his supporters, who are quite boisterous and often very well armed, remember this is the United States, actually tried to stop people from wearing masks, actually pulled masks off of people in places like Walmarts and that sort of thing. So mask wearing has been politicized as well. No mask was a sign of protecting civil liberties and asserting freedoms. Now, this may seem very strange, but Americans, especially on the right, tend to be obsessed with individualism. Alexis de Tocqueville, when he wrote his famous volume, Democracy in America, back in the 1830s, declared that Americans love equality more than liberty. And then he spent the rest of his book demonstrating that that wasn't really true. If you look at politics in the United States, there's a lot of resistance to social democracy measures, things like Obamacare, universal health care. People tend to be suspicious of those for two reasons, because there's a great deal of anti-statism in the US. People don't trust the government. And also because there's just a deeply ingrained suspicion of social democracy and social safety nets, because they don't fit with individualism. In the individualistic political culture, people believe that their future is in their own hands. So they believe that the rich are rich for a good reason. And unfortunately, that means they believe the poor are poor because of their own bad choices and their own bad behavior. So there is an obsession with individualism. And the mask and the politicization of this disease became yet another issue with individualism. Americans also worry that too much power will fall in too few hands. And the reason this man is able to buy all of these guns and all of this ammunition is because the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution says that people can keep guns in order to protect themselves against the government, essentially. So it's a very strange situation in terms of how the politicization of the pandemic has played out in the United States. A lot of these ideas about the pandemic being a hoax, about disrespect to the president and that sort, these proliferate on social media. And the cartoon here captures it very well. President Trump has undermined faith in legitimate news sources. He has said that the media, I quote, are enemies of the people. Given that, people turn to social media to find what they want to hear. Even the mainstream media have become polarized. So this is Fox News. This is a news network which some years ago, under the leadership of Roger Ailes, decided to make their policy one of supporting the right, supporting conservatives, because they understood that conservatives, many of whom were old, senior citizens, basically wanted to be reassured that their values were correct and their beliefs were true. So Fox News has become very successful with this model. And under a conservative president like Trump, they've been extremely popular, and they have worked very hard to protect the president. So you can see they're basically dismissing the coronavirus pandemic as a hoax, that it's something that was created by President Trump's political opponents to use against him. The idea that it's just hysteria, that the mainstream media, or as Mr. Trump calls it, the lamestream media, had basically fabricated this pandemic just to attack him politically. And Fox News and some other rightist news outlets have supported that, which leads to a great deal of confusion. Click this, it's very amusing. So Mr. Trump has used the pandemic to polarize the country and cast doubts on the legitimacy of the democratic process. You've probably heard he's talked about an emergency. People have decided that they want to vote by mail because they're worried about going into crowded polling places because of the disease. And he has declared that those votes will be invalid. He tried to actually remove letter sorting machines from post offices to slow down mail-in ballots and such forth. He has even suggested that he will stay for another term, which is, he would stay for 3 terms, which is not permitted by the Constitution. More importantly, he has suggested that if he loses the election in November, he will not accept the result. So this is a terrible, terrible blow, a terrible challenge to the democratic system in the United States. And we only wish that he had done something to actually address the pandemic early on, when it might have helped, and it might have saved tens of thousands of lives. And then there is the effect of the lockdowns on democracy and the POQ. Okay, the POQ is not a term used by most political scientists. It's a term that's used by me, and I'm sorry. It's a very rude term, so I do apologize. POQ is the pissed off quotient. Pissed off is a rather rude American term for being angry. But as a political scientist, I'd say that the POQ is the range between a society's general level of frustration and the point at which civil unrest breaks out and political violence can break out. Simply put, it's a society's readiness to explode, how close it is to the exploding point. And a big question is, did the frustrations created by the COVID lockdowns narrow the POQ in the USA and elsewhere? And the answer is probably. Now, we have a problem in the United States with the disproportionate killing of Black men by police. It's nothing new. There have been significant incidents in 2012 and 2016. But in fact, it's very common. It's far too common. There is structural racism in the United States. And one of the side effects of this, or one of the symptoms of this, is that young Black men are statistically far more likely to be sent to prison than white men convicted of the same crime. And young Black men proportionately are much more likely to be killed by a police officer. The police are not supposed to be killing anybody, obviously. They are the police. They are not the courts. They are not a jury. So most of these killings are illegal. But what's interesting is the explosion of unrest touched off by the killing of George Floyd, which you see here, by Minneapolis police. The explosion of unrest was virtually unprecedented. It was like somebody had touched off a bomb. It just rapidly swept the country. People took to the streets in most American cities. People were protesting. People were rioting. People were looting. And they're not necessarily the same people. There are the protesters who are committed to their ideas. There are the rioters who like an opportunity to destroy things. And there are the looters, like the person in the picture, who are very organized and are generally not concerned with the Black Lives Matter movement. They're concerned with enriching themselves. And this is still going on in the United States today. There are still riots going on over the Black Lives Matter movement in numerous American cities, Portland, still in Kenosha, Chicago, elsewhere. And it will probably get worse because the full economic impact of the pandemic has not yet dawned, not yet become apparent to most Americans, and I would argue not to many people in the world. The amount of economic dislocation, the jobs that have been lost, the businesses that have been closed and will never reopen, that sort of thing has not really become apparent to people in the US. They focus on what the government says about the stock market, but that's misleading because the stock market is where all of the rich are putting their money now because they have no place else to put it. And all of those people buying into the stock market makes the indexes rise, but it's artificial. The economy has been hollowed out by the pandemic. And how many people in the US and worldwide will take to the streets? There is an economic factor to democratic consolidation anywhere. Scholars like Adam Pertsevorsky and others have tracked the relationship between economic prosperity and the durability of democracy. So he's not arguing that a rise in income or a rise in the middle class creates democracy, but he does demonstrate that a good economic situation is necessary to maintain democracy. It won't survive if the economy collapses. And unfortunately, we're facing that kind of a crisis now in many places. What are called pocketbook issues in American politics are actually far more serious than the pocketbook. They're life and death. They're people being able to feed their families, feed their children, watching their children go hungry, things like that. They naturally make it easier for people to become radicalized. It raises the POQ and makes it more likely that people will seek more radical remedies than democracy can provide. Another problem is authoritarian tendencies and these so-called emergency measures that have been implemented. Nearly 20 years ago, after the attacks on the USA in September of 2001, various authoritarian governments from Singapore to Guatemala and many others, they instituted harsh anti-terror measures that destroyed civil liberties and helped the governments consolidate their hold on the country. This happened in quite a few places, and the United States turned a blind eye because they were concerned about terrorism, and most of these governments that implemented these measures wrapped them in the label of terrorist, anti-terrorist laws. They haven't gone away. In most cases, these emergency measures, anti-terror measures, are still in place because they're very useful to these authoritarian governments, and there's no one to question it. There is no legislature to question it. There will be no elections to remove the government. Singapore has elections, but constitutionally, it's very difficult for the People's Action Party to lose power. So there's really no constraint on the authoritarians. And some of them are using the pandemic in the same way. So in Hungary, Viktor Orban, who used to be seen by the West as a great democratizer, has long been leading his country in the other direction. And he has used the pandemic to institute a new law to control the flow of information by imposing penalties of up to 5 years in prison for creating what the government refers to as distorted news. So essentially, any news that disagrees with the government's position will make people liable to 5 years in prison. It's supposed to be an emergency measure, but it is open-ended. It has no sunset clause. There's no clause to stipulate that when the conditions change, it will go away. So it is effectively there as long as the government wants it to be there. Somewhat closer to your home in Cambodia, Hun Sen has used the pandemic to take his country even farther into authoritarianism. Now, Hun Sen has been an authoritarian for a long time, and he has implemented all sorts of new measures to consolidate his party's control so that they can hand that down to their children. He's instituted broad programs of telecommunication and internet surveillance as a result of the pandemic. Why? What is the connection between surveillance on telecommunications and on the internet? Control of information is essential to maintenance of an authoritarian regime. So again, he's chipped away at democracy, what little democracy was left in Cambodia, in the name of the pandemic, using the pandemic for an excuse. And again, there is no sunset clause. There's no stipulation that this law will go away when the situation changes. And the same kind of thing has happened in China, in Uruguay, in Brazil. It's too common. And it's very disturbing that the pandemic is being used this way to erode democracy. So with their democracy, where will it go? Since the days of Thomas Jefferson, America has viewed itself as a standard bearer of democracy in the world. Jefferson believed that spreading liberty by any means necessary was a good cause. It seems hard to remember this now, but at that time, America was a revolutionary state. If it's true that nothing will be the same because of the pandemic, how could it reshape democracy? Trump's response to the pandemic at home and its impact on US democracy erodes US prestige. It erodes America's soft power, just as it undermines the credibility of pro-democracy movements around the world. pro-democracy movements that America has long supported. In contrast, China and its model of achieving success without democracy has expanded its prestige and influence, its soft power, partly through the control of information, to support its community of a shared future narrative. And in doing so, they lend their soft power to anti-democratic movements, to would-be authoritarians and autocrats around the world. And this is especially difficult for societies transitioning to democracy because they are characterized by internal struggles between, or contests anyway, between pro-liberal, pro-democracy, and more authoritarian-leaning parties and groups. So it is a challenging time for democracy. But just as the pandemic is reshaping economies and modes of work and patterns of human interaction, democracy may be reshaped as well. Excuse me. So democracy is a body of ideas, and it can be shaped any number of ways to adapt to most types of cultures, even more community-based cultures, less individualistic. The United States, for a long time, has promoted itself as being synonymous with democracy, but there's no rule that democracy has to follow the American pattern or that it has to be shaped after the American model. It can be changed quite a bit and still be democracy. We may see democracy emerge in new forms that differ from Western models, more suited to non-Western societies. Again, there is this emphasis on the individual that we associate with Western societies. That doesn't necessarily have to be a part of democracy. But for now, so far, the pandemic seems to be favoring the autocrats, like Xi Jinping. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I will look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you, Professor Seeds. It's really interesting presentations there, and I'd like to pinpoint on the point that you propose on your previous presentations. It's really interesting when you say that there is possibility for the new emergence of the new democracy models. Well, I think this is a thing that we have to explore, whether a democracy will be try to find some principle that connects to the roots of community as well as society. Okay then, but before we go into that one, we on my chat box here, I can see tons of questions there. Hold on.
Oh.
Tons of questions, and perhaps okay, I just going to invite perhaps a question from Regina. Regina, are you there? Are you on? Regina is my student at the postgraduate of administrative study. Regina, do you want to ask directly to Professor Seitz?
It's my pleasure to ask directly to Mr. Thomas.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So my question is based on your story about the chaos phenomena in the U.S. community. About there are many contestations, not only in terms of law, but also the point of view of the pandemic, which is it saw as the political tools from their opponent or other ideology. But my question is how the U.S. community see the increase of death case in the U.S. because based on the news that I read before, U.S. is one of the countries that have the highest death case from the COVID. Does it change or reshape their thought about how to live in the COVID pandemic, or change their political options, or like change that is it true that COVID exists in this reality nowadays? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. The situation regarding the numbers of fatalities, of deaths in the US is very strange, because the country has become so polarized politically that the supporters of President Trump simply will not believe that those numbers are real. There are a lot of stories about why those numbers are so high. There's one story that I've heard from, I should explain that, I work at a university, but I also raise cattle. So I have lots of liberal friends from the universities and lots of conservative friends from the cattle business. My conservative friends keep telling me this story that every time somebody is killed in a car accident or some kind of mishap, the state records their death as being a COVID death, because then they get money from the government. Now, remember, when I say the state, I mean the 50 different states in the US. And this is nonsense, but it's something that was promoted on social media. But it's one of the stories that people use to reassure themselves that the president is right. So when they have to confront the fact that there are so many, 200,000 deaths from the virus, they'll say, well, those deaths are really not from the virus. That's what the media says. The truth is that, anybody who is killed in a car accident gets recorded as a COVID death. So I guess what I'm saying is many people have not yet confronted the situation. They still insist that it's not real, or as President Trump put it, it's no worse than the flu, that kind of thing. So I'm sure it seems very illogical from your perspective, from where you sit, but that's really the answer. Most people simply haven't confronted it. They're in denial.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Tom, for your answer. Okay, I'm going to go to the next questions. We have Jacinda Jelinitrisiata. Okay, Jacinda, are you there? Do you want to ask directly to Professor Tom, or do you want me just to read it for you, or we can just read it together here? Okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for opportunity. My name is Jacinda Jelinitrisia. I'm from Sociology, Jember University. As we can see, COVID-19 cases in Indonesia increase every day. Even though we have done a lot of efforts to solve these cases. Based on that, the future democracy and pandemic will determine the direction of national, economic, and politics. So that's why is it possible that Indonesia will be trapped again in other procedural democracy that's called oligarchy, which the power is held by a small elite group who manipulates all of this. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Pak Tom, I reckon you can actually know where this question goes. So you want me? So do you want to answer it directly, or?
Well, I would. I can try to answer it, and you can let me know how I do. So thank you for the question. There are two different things at work here. One is the effect of the pandemic on the nation's economic and political life, as you say. Another one is the incomplete democratization process in Indonesia, which I have observed. Indonesia has made tremendous strides in democratizing since 1999. you elect your president directly. The United States still does not do that. After 240 years, we still don't elect our president directly. So there's been great progress, but I would argue, and some of my research would argue, that the political culture in Indonesia has not yet incorporated the idea of holding the government accountable as it should. Younger people do, but many of the older people don't. And to me, this is one of the reasons why it can fall into a more procedural form of democracy and even an oligarchy, although that term surprises me. I know that there are some horrible rich people in Indonesia who behave very badly, people like, I don't know if I should say anybody, but I always have to say Bakri as an example. So there will be power will be held by a small group until the people actually start exercising their power. And that's a matter of developing a sense of accountability, of developing a sense of what the vote is for. It's not proper for me as an American to lecture people on democracy right now because our democracy is in so much trouble. But that's what I see as the problem. Will the pandemic make this problem worse in Indonesia? That's almost a question I would throw back to you, because you know that situation much better than I do. What do you think, Dr. Rahman?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go agree with that one. And one thing that is kind of like important, I think, is how the Indonesian government as well as the United States have this, I think, a similar situation. You guys going to have an elections next month, and we are going to have a plan for local regional elections on December. So there's been wide debate, and as my student, her name is Arinda Suandaru here, just going to relate to the question here. Arinda is also highlighting that the fact that we're going to have a local election here, and even the two major Islamic organizations in Indonesia, which is Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, has been asking the government to postpone the local elections. But because we see that this pandemic has been showing for not stopping, it's just kind of like getting worse in Indonesia, and we can see how the response of accountability from the government when they're implementing the operation for controlling the pandemic is not going to the people. Most of the people see that it's not working in a manner that it should be. So what do you think on that one, Pak Tom, on the similarity between the problem in, I don't know, in the United States? You guys are still going to have elections on November, right? And what is the system for that one? Is it going to be online vote or by post? Or I know because Donald Trump is kind of like make some kind of like several attempts to make the U.S. postal problem. Maybe you can iterate that on my point as well.
Okay. In the American election, we have avoided online voting because in the last election, there was so much effort from especially Russia to try to hack into the system. So people don't feel that there's a secure online system available yet. So people still vote the very traditional way, mostly in person. They walk to a polling place and they cast their vote. Because of COVID, there's been much more interest in mail-in voting. Some states have had mail-in voting for a while, but most have not. And this year, because of the pandemic, most states have implemented mail-in voting because there's a lot of concern about going into crowded polling places and catching the disease. But there's a political dimension to this because mail-in voters are usually Democrats. Remember, we just have two main parties here. There are many smaller parties, but only the Democrats and the Republicans win. And mail-in voting has been used mainly by Democrats. And as President Trump said, if mail-in voting is instituted, there will never be another Republican elected. So he has done everything he can to stop mail-in voting.
Mm-hmm. This is interesting. How can I put it? A slow assault on democracy, because what's happening is on the contrary in Indonesia. We can see how this democratization is being embedded with the lack of accountability when it's come down and approaching some kind of like big agenda as these local elections. We can see as you pointed, Professor Sates, it's been how this pandemic has been politically politicized as well. In several cases in Indonesia, we can see several initiatives has been done by some local governments, has been kind of like, how to put it, has been bashed by the central government, because while at the other end, the central government still have their own problem in deciding which law that they should follow, which is they going to follow the law of the emergency or the law of the health quarantine law. So there's been several debates as well in Indonesia. And okay, let me bring you to the next question, which I think you did already making point on. This one is from Izariski Milian. He is one of my students at the postgraduate administrative studies, and he is asking in Bahasa. Just going to pick real quick what he's trying. Okay, so he was saying that this communist country are performing much better in a way compared to democratic countries like Vietnam and countries like China. With their narrative, they claim they doing much better, especially when you see Vietnam. I mean, they're doing really great in Southeast Asia region. And this has come back to the question that we propose on this lecture, which is the democratic system is helpless to controlling this pandemic compared to the communist country. Perhaps you can pinpoint again your point that you've been proposed, Professor Sates.
Okay, well, thank you for the question. One of the interesting things to note is that there are a lot of democratic countries, aside from the United States, a lot of European countries, for example, that have addressed the pandemic much more seriously and have had better performance. Sorry, I just was handed a message. So it's not necessarily the case that all the democratic societies are doing badly and the communist societies are doing well. Some of the Europeans are doing well, but at the moment they seem to be sliding into another surge of the virus. They've all applied different measures. Most of them applied very stringent lockdowns, which the United States never did. So they've had varying degrees of success with that. The problem with the communist countries, I'm sorry to say, and this is partly because I'm an old guy with a long history of, been a political scientist for 30 odd years. It's very hard to trust their figures. Russia, which is not a communist country anymore, but is an authoritarian country, they said for the longest time they had almost no cases. And then all of a sudden, their numbers exploded because they couldn't keep the lid on their reporting anymore. They couldn't control the reporting. Countries like Vietnam, I'm not familiar with their situation. I think a lot of the government of Vietnam and what they've done, but it's difficult for me to imagine that they've had such success in very large metropolitan areas like Ho Chi Minh City. So one of the reasons I don't trust the figures from communist countries is I can't imagine what they've done that's more severe than what the Europeans have done. Not the Americans. The Americans have not taken it seriously. But some of the countries in Europe have had very strict lockdowns. Germany has had reasonable success. Their chancellor is a scientist, Angela Merkel. Of course, New Zealand has had exemplary success, another country led by a woman. I'm not sure that that is a factor, but it's interesting to note. So I know that's a very unsatisfactory answer, but that is how I see it.
Okay. Okay, Pak Tom. Thank you, Professor Sates. It's an interesting point when you mentioning about trust. As we know that these several communist countries, just like North Korea as well. And actually, I'm not very familiar with the numbers that come from whether it's an authoritative or communist country. But I gotta agree with you on the point that what has been they do to prevent all of this one, and then the accountability to make the people trust the case of Russia when you're saying that one they cannot control the reporting data. That's one of the problem as well about this pandemic. But okay, Professor Sates, just to wrapping up all of this session that we have today. I know we still have plenty of questions here, but I know that we cannot keep you longer because I know that you haven't got your dinner, and then we don't want to keep you that long from here. So just to wrapping up, you're mentioning about the democracy model in the future that you emphasize that it could be any model that can absorb and adapt from the local culture. And what with this pandemic, what is your take on this one for the future of democracy? Is democracy, the face of democracy, the shape is going to be changed in the future? I know that the Western democracy has been not fulfilling very well in this pandemic to show some kind of like really good silver lining. But what is your take on this one as a wrap of our discussion?
Okay. I do a lot of work on political cultures, and one of the things that I feel strongly about is that cultures are built of ideas, and ideas are shaped by experience. So Western democracy, including the United States, is shaped by the experiences of Europe in the 17th and 18th century. For example, the reason that we have the separation of church and state in our Constitution is because many of the people who came to the United States in the 17th century were fleeing religious wars, like the 30 Years' wars between the Catholic Church and the Protestants. So they wanted to keep religion out of the government. So that's based on experience. A lot of the political thought of the 18th century was based on that experience. And that has shaped Western democracies a great deal. Non-Western democracies have very different histories. They have very different experiences. You know, for example, Indonesia will never separate the church and the state, or religion and the state. There's no reason to. There hasn't been the same experience. The prophet himself was a man of the people and a man of God. So what greater example is there than that? So different forms of democracy will be shaped by different experiences which have shaped political cultures. Some will be much more community-based. I know one of the Pancasila principles is social democracy. I believe that's kind of the way humankind is headed. So societies with very different histories will have different political cultures, and democracy will have to be adapted to those cultures.
Well, thank you, Pak Tom, for your conclusion point. It's very fruitful lecture that we have today, and we hope what we have listened from you, we can learn, and all of point of sharing here is about how we exchanging our views. We're here in Indonesia, and you're there at your ranch in Wyoming. So I hope this kind of thing, people to people relation, is more important than country to country relations. And thank you for being very nice, for bringing for bridging the people to people relation, Pak Tom. And yeah, so we hope we can see you in the near future, and stay healthy and get some ginger for your coughing, Pak Tom.
I will. I missed Indonesian ginger tea, and thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure to be here, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Pak Tom. Well,
Okay.
I'm going to switch speak in Indonesia again.
Good night.
Oke, baik semuanya, kita tadi sudah mendengarkan apa yang menjadi kuliah umum dari Profesor Tom Seeds,
Dalam 1
sungguh menarik tadi.
kita target baca Al-Quran.
Ya, tolong sebelum saya akhiri, tolong teman-teman, kami ucapkan terima kasih kepada semua pihak yang telah bekerja sama demi terselenggaranya acara ini, Open Lecture 1, 2, dan 3, tim kami di Pascasarjana, ada Puning Room, Mbak Vena, ada Virgil, ada Robin, dan juga MC kita ada Mbak Palupi, dan juga 2 gatekeeper kita, Pak Hari dan juga Pak Erwin. Terima kasih atas kerjasama yang solid. Pada teman-teman yang hadir, kami Bapak dan Ibu yang hadir dalam acara ini, kami ucapkan terima kasih, dan semoga apa yang kita pelajari ini mendapatkan berkah dan pengetahuan untuk kemanfaatan kita bersama. Saya akhiri acara ini dan akan saya serahkan kepada moderator. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Sesi dokumentasi, hadirin dimohon mempersiapkan diri. Ladies and gentlemen, the documentation session is about to start. Please prepare yourself. All participants are requested to turn on the camera and make a proper gesture. We will count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hadirin yang kami hormati, link presensi telah dibagikan dengan batasan waktu 30 menit. Mohon segera melengkapi presensi Anda. Ladies and gentlemen, the list of attendants have been deployed. The link will be available only in 30 minutes. Please make sure to record your attendance. Hadirin yang kami hormati, demikianlah rangkaian acara telah kita lalui dengan tertib dan lancar. Atas nama panitia, kami mengucapkan terima kasih dan penghargaan setinggi-tingginya atas kehadiran dan perhatian seluruh hadirin. Mohon maaf atas segala kekurangan, baik disengaja maupun tidak disengaja. Distinguished guests, this event has passed well. On behalf of the committee, we would like to express our gratitude and highest appreciation of the attendance and attention of all attendees. Apologize for any flaws. Thank you, and we'll see you again in the future. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik merupakan salah satu divisi dalam Universitas Jember yang berdiri sejak 15 September 1961. FISIP menjadi penyelenggara pendidikan dan pengajaran bidang sosial dan politik dengan pengembangan kompetensi yang berwawasan lokal maupun global, tanggap terhadap perubahan, berkemampuan tinggi, mampu menjawab tantangan dunia kerja dan kebutuhan stakeholder. FISIP Universitas Jember mengelola 9 jurusan, terdiri dari 2 jurusan dengan jenjang D3, 5 jurusan berjenjang S1, 1 jurusan berjenjang S2, dan 1 jurusan berjenjang S3. Pada jenjang D3, FISIP memiliki jurusan perpajakan dan usaha perjalanan wisata. Jenjang S1 terdiri dari jurusan hubungan internasional, administrasi bisnis, administrasi niaga, sosiologi, dan ilmu kesejahteraan sosial. FISIP juga memiliki program Magister dan program Doktor Ilmu Administrasi. Ketersediaan pengajar di FISIP Universitas Jember terbilang memadai. Terdapat 88 dosen dengan kualifikasi 1 orang guru besar, 25 orang berpendidikan S3, 62 orang berpendidikan S2. Kondisi ini berdampak pada pencapaian kompetensi baik dari sisi kedalaman analisis problem solving, kemampuan berbahasa asing, penerjemahan implementasi kebijakan pimpinan, serta transfer knowledge pola pembinaan dosen senior kepada dosen junior. Memantapkan kegiatan rutin dalam Tridharma perguruan tinggi merupakan salah satu bentuk pengembangan fakultas menjadi lebih baik. Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember bertekad untuk mengembangkan kualitas dengan meningkatkan produktivitas pada berbagai aspek. Pelayanan berorientasi pada quality first. Unggul dalam pengembangan sains dan berwawasan lingkungan dan bisnis merupakan visi Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember. Visi dituangkan dalam bentuk usaha-usaha untuk menjadikan Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Politik Universitas Jember sebagai wadah yang berwawasan ecopreneurship.
Mulai saat Januari ini, saya sudah berupaya untuk program-program apa yang utama dilaksanakan atau dilakukan. Sehingga sebelum Desember nanti, paling tidak November, semua pekerjaan yang ada di lingkungan FISIP ini terselesaikan.
Dalam rangka meningkatkan kualitas input, proses, dan output secara berkelanjutan, Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Politik Universitas Jember menyusun kebijakan standar akademik untuk mencetak mahasiswa yang berkualitas, beriman dan bertakwa pada Tuhan Yang Maha Esa, menguasai dan menerapkan dasar-dasar keilmuan, mengikuti perkembangan iptek, berwawasan lingkungan, berdaya nalar tinggi, profesional, mandiri, kreatif, inovatif, adaptif, terampil di bidang IT, mampu berkomunikasi dengan baik, serta menguasai bahasa asing menjadi kualifikasi utama.
Banyak hal yang telah kami lakukan selama ini. Yang pertama adalah meningkatkan kualitas SDM, yakni dosen-dosen, tenaga administrasi dan sebagainya yang telah kami kirim untuk meningkatkan pendidikannya di perguruan tinggi yang lain maupun di dalam. Kemudian di mahasiswa pun juga kami adakan banyak kegiatan mengundang tamu-tamu baik skala lokal, nasional maupun internasional yang telah memberikan kuliah tamu di sini.
Orientasi pelaksanaan kegiatan di Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember berbasis Student Center Learning. Didukung oleh research yang memadai dengan penelitian dan pengabdian terintegrasi. Melalui koleksi buku-buku terkini dan berkualitas, FISIP Universitas Jember berusaha memenuhi kebutuhan mahasiswa dan menunjang terlaksananya kurikulum berbasis kompetensi. Dedikasi segenap sivitas akademika menjadikan FISIP Universitas Jember sebagai salah satu fakultas dengan mahasiswa berkarakter dan tenaga pengajar profesional. Penekanan arah pengembangan FISIP Universitas Jember mengarahkan agar setiap jurusan memiliki reputasi secara regional, siap mandiri, dan mampu mengolah research secara profesional. Hal ini menjadi tugas penting yang diemban setiap jurusan. Tidak hanya pengembangan secara akademik, FISIP Universitas Jember juga memperhatikan kualitas soft skills mahasiswa. Unit kegiatan mahasiswa merupakan salah satu sarana dari kampus yang dapat digunakan untuk mengembangkan potensi diri dan mengasah soft skills. Wakil Dekan 3 dalam hal ini mengemukakan bahwa keberadaan UKM menjadi suatu usaha dalam menjamin kesejahteraan mahasiswa.
UKM bagi mahasiswa adalah sebuah wadah yang difasilitasi oleh Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik sebagai arena untuk mengembangkan kreativitas dan inovasi daripada mahasiswa itu sendiri. Dengan keleluasaannya, dengan kemampuannya, dan dengan keterampilannya melalui UKM, mahasiswa bisa berkreasi semaksimal mungkin sehingga potensi yang dimiliki oleh mahasiswa bisa dikembangkan baik dari sisi kemampuan, keterampilan, dan soft skill-nya.
Sebagai divisi dalam ilmu humaniora, FISIP Universitas Jember menjadi fakultas dengan peminat yang tidak sedikit. Tercatat selama 5 tahun terakhir terjadi fluktuasi atau peningkatan jumlah peminat di FISIP Universitas Jember. Data terkini tahun 2017 menunjukkan sebanyak 7.745 peserta SNMPTN, SBMPTN, dan UMPTN memilih jurusan yang tersedia di FISIP Universitas Jember. Jurusan Ilmu Administrasi Bisnis menjadi jurusan dengan peminat terbanyak, diikuti jurusan Ilmu Administrasi Negara dan jurusan Sosiologi. Pengembangan networking dan partnership dengan sejumlah perguruan tinggi lain di dalam maupun luar negeri menjadi nilai plus bagi FISIP Universitas Jember. Tercatat dalam 5 tahun, jumlah mahasiswa asing di FISIP Universitas Jember mengalami kenaikan atau peningkatan sebanyak 5%. Hal itu menjadi bukti nyata bahwa FISIP Universitas Jember terus berusaha untuk berkembang tidak hanya pada lingkup regional saja, melainkan juga dalam kancah internasional. Implementasi dari visi dan misi FISIP Universitas Jember menghasilkan langkah nyata yang bertujuan untuk mencetak lulusan yang berkualitas, berdaya saing, dan memiliki kemampuan soft skill yang relevan. Lulusan FISIP Universitas Jember diarahkan untuk memiliki kecakapan hidup, beretika, dan berwawasan ekopreneurship sehingga mampu menjadi pioner berguna bagi nusa dan bangsa. Sebagai pemimpin penyelenggaraan pendidikan, penelitian, dan pengabdian kepada masyarakat, Dr. Ardianto MSI bersama segenap sivitas akademika FISIP Universitas Jember bertekad untuk terus membangun FISIP menjadi pusat pembelajaran, riset, dan pengabdian yang unggul. Pembangunan didesain secara sistematis, dinamis, berkelanjutan, dan akuntabel, dimulai dari peningkatan kualitas sumber daya manusia hingga merambah produktivitas divisi-divisi di dalam FISIP Universitas Jember.
Harapan ke depan FISIP Universitas Jember dapat meningkatkan kualitas sumber daya manusianya, terutama para dosennya, baik dalam bidang pengajaran, penelitian, dan pengabdian kepada masyarakat. Demikian juga mahasiswanya, baik dalam bidang pengajaran, penelitian, dan pengabdian masyarakatnya akan bisa berprestasi, dan harapan yang lebih lanjut lagi ke depan bisa bersaing pada tingkat regional dan tingkat nasional.
Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik merupakan salah satu divisi dalam Universitas Jember yang berdiri sejak 15 September 1961. FISIP menjadi penyelenggara pendidikan dan pengajaran bidang sosial dan politik dengan pengembangan kompetensi yang berwawasan lokal maupun global, tanggap terhadap perubahan, berkemampuan tinggi, mampu menjawab tantangan dunia kerja dan kebutuhan stakeholder. FISIP Universitas Jember mengelola 9 jurusan, terdiri dari 2 jurusan dengan jenjang D3, 5 jurusan berjenjang S1, 1 jurusan berjenjang S2, dan 1 jurusan berjenjang S3. Pada jenjang D3, FISIP memiliki jurusan perpajakan dan usaha perjalanan wisata. jenjang S1 terdiri dari jurusan Hubungan Internasional, Administrasi Bisnis, Administrasi Niaga, Sosiologi, dan Ilmu Kesejahteraan Sosial. FISIP juga memiliki program Magister dan program Doktor Ilmu Administrasi. Ketersediaan pengajar di FISIP Universitas Jember terbilang memadai. Terdapat 88 dosen dengan kualifikasi 1 orang guru besar, 25 orang berpendidikan S3, 62 orang berpendidikan S2. Kondisi ini berdampak pada pencapaian kompetensi baik dari sisi kedalaman analisis problem solving, kemampuan berbahasa asing, penerjemahan implementasi kebijakan pimpinan, serta transfer knowledge pola pembinaan dosen senior kepada dosen junior. Memantapkan kegiatan rutin dalam Tridharma perguruan tinggi merupakan salah satu bentuk pengembangan fakultas menjadi lebih baik. Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember bertekad untuk mengembangkan kualitas dengan meningkatkan produktivitas pada berbagai aspek. Pelayanan berorientasi pada quality first. Unggul dalam pengembangan sains dan berwawasan lingkungan dan bisnis merupakan visi Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember. Visi dituangkan dalam bentuk usaha-usaha untuk menjadikan Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Politik Universitas Jember sebagai wadah yang berwawasan ecopreneurship.
Mulai saat Januari ini, saya sudah berupaya untuk program-program apa yang utama dilaksanakan atau dilakukan. Sehingga sebelum Desember nanti, paling tidak November, semua pekerjaan yang ada di lingkungan FISIP ini terselesaikan.
Dalam rangka meningkatkan kualitas input, proses, dan output secara berkelanjutan, Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Politik Universitas Jember menyusun kebijakan standar akademik untuk mencetak mahasiswa yang berkualitas, beriman dan bertakwa pada Tuhan Yang Maha Esa, menguasai dan menerapkan dasar-dasar keilmuan, mengikuti perkembangan iptek, berwawasan lingkungan, berdaya nalar tinggi, profesional, mandiri, kreatif, inovatif, adaptif, terampil di bidang IT, mampu berkomunikasi dengan baik, serta menguasai bahasa asing menjadi kualifikasi utama.
Banyak hal yang telah kami lakukan selama ini. Yang pertama adalah meningkatkan kualitas SDM, yakni dosen-dosen, tenaga administrasi dan sebagainya yang telah kami kirim untuk meningkatkan pendidikannya di perguruan tinggi yang lain maupun di dalam. Kemudian di mahasiswa pun juga kami adakan banyak kegiatan mengundang tamu-tamu baik skala lokal, nasional maupun internasional yang telah memberikan kuliah tamu di sini.
Orientasi pelaksanaan kegiatan di Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember berbasis Student Center Learning. Didukung oleh research yang memadai dengan penelitian dan pengabdian terintegrasi. Melalui koleksi buku-buku terkini dan berkualitas, FISIP Universitas Jember berusaha memenuhi kebutuhan mahasiswa dan menunjang terlaksananya kurikulum berbasis kompetensi. Dedikasi segenap sivitas akademika menjadikan FISIP Universitas Jember sebagai salah satu fakultas dengan mahasiswa berkarakter dan tenaga pengajar profesional. Penekanan arah pengembangan FISIP Universitas Jember mengarahkan agar setiap jurusan memiliki reputasi secara regional, siap mandiri, dan mampu mengolah research secara profesional. Hal ini menjadi tugas penting yang diemban setiap jurusan. Tidak hanya pengembangan secara akademik, FISIP Universitas Jember juga memperhatikan kualitas soft skills mahasiswa. Unit kegiatan mahasiswa merupakan salah satu sarana dari kampus yang dapat digunakan untuk mengembangkan potensi diri dan mengasah soft skills. Wakil Dekan 3 dalam hal ini mengemukakan bahwa keberadaan UKM menjadi suatu usaha dalam menjamin kesejahteraan mahasiswa.
UKM bagi mahasiswa adalah sebuah wadah yang difasilitasi oleh Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik sebagai arena untuk mengembangkan kreativitas dan inovasi daripada mahasiswa itu sendiri dengan keleluasaannya, dengan kemampuannya, dan dengan keterampilannya melalui UKM. mahasiswa bisa berkreasi semaksimal mungkin sehingga potensi yang dimiliki oleh mahasiswa bisa dikembangkan baik dari sisi kemampuan, keterampilan, dan soft skill-nya.
Sebagai divisi dalam ilmu humaniora, FISIP Universitas Jember menjadi fakultas dengan peminat yang tidak sedikit. Tercatat selama 5 tahun terakhir terjadi fluktuasi atau peningkatan jumlah peminat di FISIP Universitas Jember. Data terkini tahun 2017 menunjukkan sebanyak 7.745 peserta SNMPTN, SBMPTN, dan UMPTN memilih jurusan yang tersedia di FISIP Universitas Jember. Jurusan Ilmu Administrasi Bisnis menjadi jurusan dengan peminat terbanyak, diikuti jurusan Ilmu Administrasi Negara dan jurusan Sosiologi. Pengembangan networking dan partnership dengan sejumlah perguruan tinggi lain di dalam maupun luar negeri menjadi nilai plus bagi FISIP Universitas Jember. Tercatat dalam 5 tahun, jumlah mahasiswa asing di FISIP Universitas Jember mengalami kenaikan atau peningkatan sebanyak 5%. Hal itu menjadi bukti nyata bahwa FISIP Universitas Jember terus berusaha untuk berkembang tidak hanya pada lingkup regional saja, melainkan juga dalam kancah internasional. Implementasi dari visi dan misi FISIP Universitas Jember menghasilkan langkah nyata yang bertujuan untuk mencetak lulusan yang berkualitas, berdaya saing, dan memiliki kemampuan soft skill yang relevan. Lulusan FISIP Universitas Jember diarahkan untuk memiliki kecakapan hidup, beretika, dan berwawasan ekopreneurship sehingga mampu menjadi pioner berguna bagi nusa dan bangsa. Sebagai pemimpin penyelenggaraan pendidikan, penelitian, dan pengabdian kepada masyarakat, Dr. Ardianto MSI bersama segenap sivitas akademika FISIP Universitas Jember bertekad untuk terus membangun FISIP menjadi pusat pembelajaran, riset, dan pengabdian yang unggul. Pembangunan didesain secara sistematis, dinamis, berkelanjutan, dan akuntabel, dimulai dari peningkatan kualitas sumber daya manusia hingga merambah produktivitas divisi-divisi di dalam FISIP Universitas Jember.
Harapan ke depan FISIP Universitas Jember dapat meningkatkan kualitas sumber daya manusianya, utamanya para dosennya, baik dalam bidang pengajaran, penelitian, dan pengabdian kepada masyarakat. Demikian juga mahasiswanya, baik dalam bidang pengajaran, penelitian, dan pengabdian masyarakatnya akan bisa berprestasi, dan harapan yang lebih lanjut lagi ke depan bisa bersaing pada tingkat regional dan tingkat nasional.
Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik merupakan salah satu divisi dalam Universitas Jember yang berdiri sejak 15 September 1961. FISIP menjadi penyelenggara pendidikan dan pengajaran bidang sosial dan politik dengan pengembangan kompetensi yang berwawasan lokal maupun global, tanggap terhadap perubahan, berkemampuan tinggi, mampu menjawab tantangan dunia kerja dan kebutuhan stakeholder. FISIP Universitas Jember mengelola 9 jurusan, terdiri dari 2 jurusan dengan jenjang D3, 5 jurusan berjenjang S1, 1 jurusan berjenjang S2, dan 1 jurusan berjenjang S3. Pada jenjang D3, FISIP memiliki jurusan perpajakan dan usaha perjalanan wisata. Jenjang S1 terdiri dari jurusan hubungan internasional, administrasi bisnis, administrasi niaga, sosiologi, dan ilmu kesejahteraan sosial. FISIP juga memiliki program magister dan program doktor ilmu administrasi. Ketersediaan pengajar di FISIP Universitas Jember terbilang memadai. Terdapat 88 dosen dengan kualifikasi 1 orang guru besar, 25 orang berpendidikan S3, 62 orang berpendidikan S2. Kondisi ini berdampak pada pencapaian kompetensi baik dari sisi kedalaman analisis problem solving, kemampuan berbahasa asing, penerjemahan implementasi kebijakan pimpinan, serta transfer knowledge pola pembinaan dosen senior kepada dosen junior. Memantapkan kegiatan rutin dalam Tridharma perguruan tinggi Universitas Jember bertekad untuk mengembangkan kualitas dengan meningkatkan produktivitas pelayanan berorientasi pada quality first. Unggul dalam pengembangan sains dan berwawasan lingkungan dan bisnis merupakan visi Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember. Visi dituangkan dalam bentuk usaha-usaha untuk menjadikan Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Politik Universitas Jember sebagai wadah yang berwawasan ecopreneurship.
Mulai saat Januari ini, saya sudah berupaya untuk program-program apa yang utama dilaksanakan atau dilakukan. Sehingga sebelum Desember nanti, paling tidak November, semua pekerjaan yang ada di lingkungan FISIP ini terselesaikan.
Dalam rangka meningkatkan kualitas input, proses, dan output secara berkelanjutan, Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Politik Universitas Jember menyusun kebijakan standar akademik untuk mencetak mahasiswa yang berkualitas, beriman dan bertakwa pada Tuhan Yang Maha Esa, menguasai dan menerapkan dasar-dasar keilmuan, mengikuti perkembangan iptek, berwawasan lingkungan, berdaya nalar tinggi, profesional, mandiri, kreatif, inovatif, adaptif, terampil di bidang IT, mampu berkomunikasi dengan baik, serta menguasai bahasa asing menjadi kualifikasi utama.
Banyak hal yang telah kami lakukan selama ini. Yang pertama adalah meningkatkan kualitas SDM, yakni dosen-dosen, tenaga administrasi dan sebagainya yang telah kami kirim untuk meningkatkan pendidikannya di perguruan tinggi yang lain maupun di dalam. Kemudian di mahasiswa pun juga kami adakan banyak kegiatan, mengundang tamu-tamu baik skala lokal, nasional maupun internasional yang telah memberikan kuliah tamu di sini.
Orientasi pelaksanaan kegiatan di Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik Universitas Jember berbasis Student Center Learning. Didukung oleh research yang memadai dengan penelitian dan pengabdian terintegrasi. Melalui koleksi buku-buku terkini dan berkualitas, FISIP Universitas Jember berusaha memenuhi kebutuhan mahasiswa dan menunjang terlaksananya kurikulum berbasis kompetensi. Dedikasi segenap sivitas akademika menjadikan FISIP Universitas Jember sebagai salah satu fakultas dengan mahasiswa berkarakter dan tenaga pengajar profesional. Penekanan arah pengembangan FISIP Universitas Jember mengarahkan agar setiap jurusan memiliki reputasi secara regional, siap mandiri, dan mampu mengolah research secara profesional. Hal ini menjadi tugas penting yang diemban setiap jurusan. Tidak hanya pengembangan secara akademik, FISIP Universitas Jember juga memperhatikan kualitas soft skills mahasiswa. Unit kegiatan mahasiswa merupakan salah satu sarana dari kampus yang dapat digunakan untuk mengembangkan potensi diri dan mengasah soft skills. Wakil Dekan 3 dalam hal ini mengemukakan bahwa keberadaan UKM menjadi suatu usaha dalam menjamin kesejahteraan mahasiswa.
UKM bagi mahasiswa adalah sebuah wadah yang difasilitasi oleh Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik sebagai arena untuk mengembangkan kreativitas dan inovasi daripada mahasiswa itu sendiri. Dengan keleluasaannya, dengan kemampuannya, dan dengan keterampilannya melalui UKM, mahasiswa bisa berkreasi semaksimal mungkin sehingga potensi yang dimiliki oleh mahasiswa bisa dikembangkan baik dari sisi kemampuan, keterampilan, dan soft skill-nya.
Sebagai divisi dalam ilmu humaniora, FISIP Universitas Jember menjadi fakultas dengan peminat yang tidak sedikit. Tercatat selama 5 tahun terakhir terjadi fluktuasi atau peningkatan jumlah peminat di FISIP Universitas Jember. Data terkini tahun 2017 menunjukkan sebanyak 7.745 peserta SNMPTN, SBMPTN, dan UMPTN memilih jurusan yang tersedia di FISIP Universitas Jember. Jurusan Ilmu Administrasi Bisnis menjadi jurusan dengan peminat terbanyak, diikuti jurusan Ilmu Administrasi Negara dan jurusan Sosiologi. Pengembangan networking dan partnership dengan sejumlah perguruan tinggi lain di dalam maupun luar negeri menjadi nilai plus bagi FISIP Universitas Jember. Tercatat dalam 5 tahun, jumlah mahasiswa asing di FISIP Universitas Jember mengalami kenaikan atau peningkatan sebanyak 5%. Hal itu menjadi bukti nyata bahwa FISIP Universitas Jember terus berusaha untuk berkembang tidak hanya pada lingkup regional saja, melainkan juga dalam kancah internasional. Implementasi dari visi dan misi FISIP Universitas Jember menghasilkan langkah nyata yang bertujuan untuk mencetak lulusan yang berkualitas, berdaya saing, dan memiliki kemampuan soft skill yang relevan. Lulusan FISIP Universitas Jember diarahkan untuk memiliki kecakapan hidup, beretika, dan berwawasan ekopreneurship, sehingga mampu menjadi pioner berguna bagi nusa dan bangsa. Sebagai pemimpin penyelenggaraan pendidikan, penelitian, dan pengabdian kepada masyarakat, Dr. Ardianto MSI bersama segenap sivitas akademika FISIP Universitas Jember bertekad untuk terus membangun FISIP menjadi pusat pembelajaran, riset, dan pengabdian yang unggul. Pembangunan didesain secara sistematis, dinamis, berkelanjutan, dan akuntabel, dimulai dari peningkatan kualitas sumber daya manusia hingga merambah produktivitas divisi-divisi di dalam FISIP Universitas Jember.
Harapan ke depan FISIP Universitas Jember dapat meningkatkan kualitas sumber daya manusianya, kebanyakan para dosennya, baik dalam bidang pengajaran, penelitian, dan pengabdian kepada masyarakat. Demikian juga mahasiswanya, baik dalam bidang pengajaran, penelitian, dan pengabdian masyarakatnya akan bisa berprestasi, dan harapan yang lebih lanjut lagi ke depan bisa bersaing pada tingkat regional dan tingkat nasional.
Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik merupakan salah satu divisi dalam Universitas Jember yang berdiri sejak 15 September 1961. FISIP menjadi penyelenggara pendidikan dan pengajaran bidang sosial dan politik dengan pengembangan kompetensi yang berwawasan lokal maupun global, tanggap terhadap perubahan, berkemampuan tinggi, mampu menjawab tantangan dunia kerja dan kebutuhan stakeholder. FISIP Universitas